Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Long Walk Talks. My name is David Hensley. I'm the owner and creative director of Long Walk Productions, and I am joined today, as always, by my two co-hosts, Stan Wilson Lee.
Hello.
And Chris Stomp the Yard Barnes.
Is that acceptable?
This is not going to happen.
I'm just going to keep throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks.
How about attack the block?
All this proves is you're full of shit.
And we are also joined today by a special guest host. He's the host of our sister show, This Is a Work, David Two Dogs Hayes.
How did you manage to land him?
Yeah.
I had my people reach out to his people. It was a whole thing.
It's great to be here. I do have a heart out, guys, so we can't.
You reached around to his people?
Yes, I did. So today we are going to be continuing our Quarantino discussion with two films that Tarantino wrote, asterisks, but did not direct. I'll explain the asterisks in a second, but those two films are Natural Born Killers and True Romance.
Yes.
I just want to say the last time we were all together on a show at the same time, it was me, Doggz, and Dave yelling at a phone while Stan spouted some of the worst opinions ever.
What do you mean?
Was that Ready to Rumble?
Yes.
Because I liked Ready for Rumble.
Ready
for
Rumble?
Ready for Rumble.
Ladies and gentlemen, ready for Rumble.
Oh, they announced the fourth one ahead of the second and third.
Before we start the Quarantino, I'd like to, because the last time we did this podcast was the video game adaptations, and I want to publicly thank Chris for introducing me to Detective Pikachu.
Yeah, I didn't expect this to catch on.
Oh my God, it was so fucking brilliant. So thank you very much for
You're welcome.
It was great.
Katie and I tried to watch this last night, and it turns out that it is no longer streaming on Hulu, so that was disappointing. But anyway, before we get into the discussion, I've got two notes here right at the top. One of them is a correction about the video game adaptation episode. I was talking about the character of Meat in Mortal Kombat, thinking that he was just a giant slab of meat. And I should have realized that what I was actually talking about, the character that I was thinking of, was from a game we'd already discussed, which was Resident Evil. I was thinking of the character Tofu.
Oh, that kind of crossed my mind, but I was like, no, he's insistent about it being Mortal Kombat.
I really thought it was, but no.
It's a Joe Kidden character.
How do you mistake meat for tofu?
I know, that's the joke, right?
Because tofu's fake meat.
Yeah, exactly. No, in Resident Evil 2, there's a character that's just a big slab of tofu with a knife, but the knife just floats in front of him because he doesn't have hands or arms.
It's just a big joke.
That's Resident Evil.
Residential evil.
Resident Evil is me.
Where are you today?
The only thing I drink is espresso, so I don't know what's happening.
And,
I think you just explained it.
And while we're on the topic of video games, we did get an email from a listener.
Did we really?
Yes. It's our lovely co-host of our other sister show, This Is a Takeover, Shelby Ray, emailed us to say that she would like to see the God of War franchise get the movie or TV show adaptation.
I would
treatment.
agree only if it's the latest one with the earlier games and flashbacks, because the earlier ones I can't stand because of how horrible Kratos is as a person.
And I didn't say this, I didn't send an email or anything, but I always wanted to see Metal Gear as a movie.
Well, Hideo Kojima already did it.
Yeah, no.
Did they do it?
No, I'm saying it was just the way he's designed those games.
They're basically movies.
Yes, they are.
With some interactive parts.
And isn't the Snake in the Metal Gear based on Snake from
Snake Plissken?
Yeah,
yes.
From the Escape movies?
A bit,
loosely, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of Kurt Russell, a little bit of Snake Plissken, a little bit of Big Trouble in Little China. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
A little bit of Rambo.
I know you're a fan, Doggz. Wouldn't it be great if they made an Assassin's Creed movie?
Yeah, I would love to see an Assassin's Creed movie.
If only somebody had the guts to make that.
The guts. The fortitude.
I mean, we haven't seen one yet.
No. I don't think we ever will.
I feel like that's my victory for the show. I'm out.
Well, one more thing before we continue on. Another correction. I had said that next month in June we would be talking about Jackie Brown, but going chronologically, June is actually going to be our second double feature episode. It's going to be From Dusk Till Dawn and Tarantino's segment of 4 Rooms.
Nice.
Which puts Jackie Brown in July.
Oh, that's great.
Because if I remember correctly, 4 Rooms was 1995 and From Dusk Till Dawn was 96 and Jackie Brown was 97. So I realized we needed to reverse the order of those episodes. So we're going to...
He really was on a tear. Once he got started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, once True Romance, which we'll talk about, once that screenplay sold, I mean, everything else went.
Well, yeah, so Reservoir Dogs was 92, True Romance was 93, Pulp Fiction was 94, Natural Born Killers was 95, From Dusk Till Dawn was 96, and Jackie Brown was 97, and then we didn't see another film from him, either written or directed by, until 2003 with Kill Bill. Mm-hmm. So 6-year hiatus.
He was producing stuff in the meantime, though, wasn't he, I think?
I think.
Because he created the production company, right?
Yeah, and he was also bringing a lot of movies over from China.
That's what I was thinking of. Because I
Curdled
and Hero.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to begin by pretty quickly talking about Natural Born Killers. I say pretty quickly. This conversation could take 5 minutes or it could take a half hour. We'll see what happens. We're going to move along pretty quick because I started watching this the other night with my wife, Katie, and I had told her beforehand I didn't like the movie. I was watching it for the sake of this episode.
Really? You don't like it?
I don't. I'm not a fan of Natural Born Killers, and when the credits popped up at the beginning, it said story by Quentin Tarantino, and I had completely forgotten until I went and Googled it. Oliver Stone and 2 other screenwriters changed Tarantino's script so heavily that all he got was a story by credit. So I'm not even entirely sure this really counts as a Tarantino film at all.
I always love the story by credit because it makes it sound like he basically just happened to sit down on like the same park bench as him one day and was just talking out loud.
Yeah.
And then that's how a movie got made.
Right.
So let's get started with, like we did with the other films. Chris.
Yes.
What do you know about Natural Born Killers?
I have seen some of it, and I know the basic plot. The 2 main characters is Mallory.
Mickey
and Mallory.
Knox.
They're basically just on a rampage, and it focuses not so much on them, but as it focuses more like on the conditions that made them and the condition and the surrounding I want to say of course the people who fall in love with the outlaw persona they cultivate, because there is like a definite fan club vibe that pushes throughout the movie. People being because they're getting away with it, and that's basically it to me.
Okay.
And I know the fact that I hate the ending, but
I honestly I couldn't even tell you what the ending was at this point. It's been 18 years since I saw it all the way through.
Basically, they get away with it.
Oh yeah, that's right, and they have kids and everything works out for them.
Sort of. It's they're basically the same. They're basically the same unhappy married couple.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, I want to read a couple of Tarantino quotes about the film, and then I'm going to hand it over to Stan and Doggz because they can say more about it than I can. The first is that Tarantino said that he was afraid to make any film about a serial killer because such a production would, quote, reveal my sickness far too much. The planet Earth couldn't handle my serial killer movie. And he also said... referring to Natural Born Killers, which apparently came out in 94, not 95. But he said, I hate that fucking movie. If you like my stuff, don't watch that movie.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's hand it over to Doggz first. You watched this you watched it earlier this week, right?
Yeah, I did watch it earlier last week, and it's the first time that I've watched Natural Born Killers in probably at least 12 years. The first time, I want to say I saw this in the theater, and this was at the height of everybody's powers. Oliver Stone was on a roll here, he was starting.
Was this after his JFK?
This was after JFK,
and right before Nixon.
Okay.
Right, and he was starting to. He was getting out there with his symbolism, and it was he just exploded with it in this movie. You had Woody Harrelson in this, who he was about at the height of his powers, and Juliette Lewis was just coming in. You had
Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones,
Tommy Lee
RDJ.
Jones
Tom
that was
Sizemore.
doing his thing. Tom Sizemore has always been around middle of the road, just as far as everything goes, and then you had Robert Downey Jr., who's making his comeback.
The first one, right?
The first one, yeah. And see, you know, the great thing about this movie is whether you like it or you don't, this set up a lot of the way your Gen X thinks, because this is where they came up in this movie, watching this movie. This was, in a way, this was their movie.
Yeah, it kind of is the Gen X statement on the state of the world. Kind
And
of.
it's
Because of the whole satire on media.
yeah,
It's
and you
very
can
media.
you can smell Gen X on this. I mean, it's
Well, it's definitely been called one of the most controversial movies of the 90s.
absolutely. And as far as just being a good movie, for me, this is in my top 20 of movies. This
Really?
is number
Wow.
18 for me. Yeah, yeah.
Specifically 18.
Wow, he can
Specifically
pinpoint it.
18,
All right.
yeah.
What's below it?
But right, 17.
And 19 and 20. What's
I don't want to tell you what 17 is
What's
because you'll
17?
make fun of me,
what?
babe.
Babe is awesome. That's like top 10, man.
This turned surprisingly wholesome.
Babe is
Yeah, I know,
awesome.
right?
Yeah, to go from Babe
Babe
to
is
Natural Born
beautiful.
Killers.
Yeah, yeah.
Natural Babe Killers.
Yeah.
But I think they're contemporaries. You know, Babe and Natural Born Killers is around.
In that they were both
It's the
out
double
around the
feature
same
everybody
time.
needs
Same
to
time.
see.
Exactly.
and it did allow you to release yourself from Natural Born Killers and the fact that
Yeah,
effect
I
that
could-
it had on you.
Oh, like a
You
palate
see
cleanser?
Babe-
I could see that, yeah.
And,
It's like,
and
yeah,
Babe is just beautiful all the way around.
I
Oh
could,
yeah. It's a heartwarming story.
Oh
it's,
my God.
it's a modern little fairy tale.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Number 19 is Untamed Heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Stan, what were
Another
your
Christian Slater.
That Untamed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'll be talking about Christian Slater soon, won't we?
yes, as in
Yes,
the next
yes.
film that we discuss. He's the star of True Romance.
Yes, he is.
He got super
I'm like,
excited.
It is Christian Slater, right? Yes, it is.
He got super excited, like you told, like you asked a dog if he wanted to go for a walk.
I thought I was mixing it up with Crispin Glover for a second there, but who is also
How? Okay.
in the next movie.
Crispin.
No, he's not.
No.
No.
See, that's what I'm saying. But anyway,
You're playing 6 degrees of separation
I
here
know, I
because
guess so.
Katie and I also watched What's Eating Gilbert
That's-
Grape the other night, which Juliette Lewis is also in
Oh,
with
dude.
Crispin Glover. Yeah, Crispin Glover is in.
is Crispin?
Yeah, he's in
in
What's
6
Eating Gilbert Grape.
No.
I said we're playing 6. Oh my God, let's move on.
Who's in A Few Good Men with Kevin
What's Eating
Bacon?
Gilbert Grape is Leonardo DiCaprio and
Yes, Leonardo DiCaprio, Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp,
yes,
Juliette Lewis,
and Crispin Glover's
Crispin
in it?
Glover.
I don't remember.
Who does he
He's a- he's one of the two friends.
Okay.
One of Gilbert's two friends.
All right. Okay. My take on Natural Born Killers, which
Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about.
What year is it?
Go, Stan. Let me hear it. I'm excited.
Natural Born Killers. Not my favorite Tarantino-esque bit, but at the time that it came out, it did blow me away when I first saw it. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was really crafty filmmaking. Again, I'm an Oliver Stone fan, so the idea that it was totally different for Oliver Stone because for him, it was his release. It was his ability. It was his permission that he was given to not be the earnest filmmaker that he'd been for the last 15, 20 years, starting with Platoon and such. He got to actually make a movie for fun, which he really enjoyed, and because he got to do a Tarantino script. And yes, he rewrote it and stuff, and yeah, it definitely is more Stone than Tarantino, but the idea that he was going to have fun, he knew it was a Tarantino script, and he knew he would have fun. and he knew that everybody in the cast would have a blast, and so he basically the on-set experience was not a typical Oliver Stone thing. So it was different for Oliver Stone. I was able to enjoy it on that part, that he was doing just something right, totally off the cuff, off the hook. You know, it was Woody Harrelson. We do get to see Woody Harrelson, and what he becomes later starts in Natural Born Killers.
You mean unhinged?
Unhinged, but that what we love in the later stuff that we see him in. Oh my God. The HBO series.
True Romance?
No.
I mean, True Detective.
True Detective.
Wow.
What he like.
They both start with True.
Yes.
Shut up.
What he becomes in True Detective, what he becomes in just so many of the great things that we see. Even Kingpin.
Zombieland.
Zombieland, Catching...
Kingpin's number 15.
The Catching Fire series, or not Catching Fire, but the...
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games series.
Jesus, I forgot he was in that.
But stuff that we really love about Woody Harrelson, and the fact that he's a chameleon, and the fact that he's like the coolest pot smoker that ever existed in the world. But a lot of the... And then the thing that strikes me most about Natural Born Killers, and that I will always love her for, I believe nobody smokes a cigarette as well, and will never ever smoke a cigarette as well as Juliette Lewis. And she is the best on-screen kisser that's ever happened.
This is a strange eulogy. It's
She's not dead, is she?
No, I just wanted to say it.
Oh my God, you're going to hurt me. 'Cause she is also one of my future ex-wives. Along with...
Does she know that?
Along with Elizabeth Cook. And,
This is the warning.
But, what?
Nothing.
But this is the warning. That's all right. Okay, but Juliette Lewis, I have a thing about business and theater, or business on film, and most of that is through smoking or through what you do when you're not speaking lines. And probably the best non-line speaking actor, especially at that time, was Juliette Lewis. She could do so much without saying a word, and the way she just committed to every bit she was doing at such a young age was great. And that started in Cape Fear, which is a few years before this, probably late 80s. Was that right? Or is that 90? But anyway, but she was a young kid in Cape Fear. She comes back, and this connects it to Tarantino's, that she comes back for From Dusk Till Dawn. Again, connecting it to Tarantino.
Cape Fear was 91.
Cape Fear was right before this, then, or a couple of years before this.
Hot off the heels of Christmas Vacation.
Right off the heels of Christmas Vacation.
That's right, I worked it out.
Tom Sizemore comes back for True Romance. And for Tom Sizemore, this was, along with Robert Downey Jr., this was during both of their height of their drug-addled years.
Yes.
And what helped Tom Sizemore, basically Spielberg told him, you can't do Saving Private Ryan unless you get clean. So that helped.
Right.
And he also met a girl that helped him get clean. But the opportunity to do Saving Private Ryan helped Tom Sizemore. Robert Downey Jr., he went to rehab, 6 times after this before he finally decided and to go on his really important, because he wouldn't have been able to do Charlie, the Chaplin movie, without getting clean, even though he was a little high on that set, but still he had to go to rehab to do that and to be able to direct that and star in it and get his Oscar nomination. But both of these actors, somehow, some way, and they were, and when I say drug-addled, these guys were gone.
That's to say nothing of Oliver Stone himself,
exactly,
the world's biggest cocaine fan.
Exactly.
Honestly, Hollywood is amazing at enabling functioning addicts, and
true,
especially their actors.
Well, encouraging it essentially.
Because Robert Downey Jr. doesn't have really any memory of Natural Born Killers, except that it was he was able to do coke on set, and he did
yeah,
it with
and
everybody
I
else.
still love the stories of coke being delivered to the set of the Blues Brothers in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
They had a cocaine budget.
Yeah,
a lot of
for
movies
Dan
did.
Aykroyd and John Belushi.
And speaking of cocaine, how creepy was Rodney Dangerfield in this movie?
That's what I was coming.
He was terrifying.
I was gonna toss out
that was also, and I had forgotten about Rodney Dangerfield until I just rewatched it.
That's a shame.
And then it was like-
RDJ doesn't remember it because it's a reunion between him and his back to school co-star.
Exactly.
Right.
But he does remember. He does remember Rodney Dangerfield, but they weren't able to do scenes together.
That's a
so
shame.
it's like, but Rodney Dangerfield is great.
Speaking of him, what speaks out to you saying this is a Gen X movie is the scene where they have Mallory and is it Mickey?
Yeah,
Mickey
Mickey.
Mallory meeting. They decide to play it up as a 3-camera sitcom.
Yep.
Yes.
Where it starts out as a typical sitcom and then just immediately devolves into horror.
It doesn't even.
I mean, barely. It
forgotten.
barely starts. It barely starts okay.
Yeah, like right out of the gate, this is the world's most fucked up sitcom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did make it that far in my rewatch of it before
And
I
not even
eventually
just a
turned it off.
sitcom, but a 1960s based
Mm-hmm.
sitcom. Leave It to Beaver style. I Love Lucy type thing.
The little brother is dressed up like Gene Simmons.
Yep.
I mean, it's choking itself with 90s, with just the flavor that was the 1990s. The whole thing, and the symbolism almost to the point of absurdity.
I would say it's right at the point of absurdity. There's no almost.
And it makes sense because they say like nostalgia is on like about a 30-year cycle. So of course that's where about a 25 to 30-year cycle. So that's why it would draw from like the 60s sitcoms to me. Stuff like that.
I kind of wish that I had been recording Katie's reactions to just the 10 minutes that we saw of it because she was like, "What the fuck is happening?"
Has
What
she
is up?"
never seen it all?
No.
Oh wow.
The shots of the deer that just randomly appeared during the weird cocaine montage sequences.
The snake and the scorpion symbolism throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. The weird cutting back and forth of color and black and white, which during that opening diner scene is literally every other shot for a solid 2 or 3 minutes there.
Which brings us to a Tarantino connection. It starts in a diner.
Yeah. But see, that's also something else. As just growing up, we had never really seen a movie like this. And,
Exactly.
and that's why it set the precedence for people that were growing up around that time, because this was again, like it or not, this set the tone for kids that were coming up in that age, and it was a lash out. It was Mickey and Mallory were our Bonnie and Clyde.
Right. They were anti-heroes.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the era of mass media.
Right.
And I would argue that because it was done by Stone, an established director who had, known for Platoon, known for Born on the 4th of July,
And he had just finished something in China. What? Oh God!
The third,
something about
with Tommy Lee Jones, the third of the Vietnam trilogy. I think Hearts and Minds, I believe, or something. But
that sounds something like that.
Yeah.
It was something around that. It was something. It was a true story.
Yep.
It was.
But I would argue that because it was done by Stone and that it was a Tarantino script originally, it made Tarantino acceptable to the mainstream audience that would come afterwards. Because a name director and name producers latched onto Tarantino, so it made Tarantino okay for the rest of the world.
Now, see, my experience with this film, I watched it back in 2002 when I was working my way through all of Tarantino's filmography up to that point. I was 16 years old, and I feel like my initial appreciation of this film was solely based on the fact that I was 16 years old and very impressionable.
Yeah.
And even so many, 8 years removed from its release, as you talk about Gen Xers, I feel like I wanted to like this film because it was controversial and because it was counterculture and because I was a 16-year-old little shit.
I'm pretty sure that's how they marketed it too.
Yeah.
It's so overtly artsy and it's so out there that I rented it, I watched it, I went out and I got the unrated director's cut DVD and watched that. And then I just didn't watch it again for 18 years until I tried to rewatch it the other night. But my opinion of it soured over time so much as I grew up and as I got more into filmmaking and storytelling. And as I thought back on it, like, holy shit, what a fever dream of a film.
And I think I can probably speak. You tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. I feel like why you soured on it is the fact that this also gave birth to the wannabe beatnik, the artsy fartsy wannabe.
This is how the world is, man.
The hipster?
Yeah. Not so much the hipster.
Something comes along. It's a generational thing. Something comes along to every generation of filmmakers that brings that back to the forefront of let's be artsy for the sake of being artsy. Let's employ these weird edits, all of this symbolism, both overt and underlying. Natural Born Killers was that for the 90s. So every decade and every generation of filmmakers has this person or this film that brings that back.
They want to make the next one, but missing the point of what it was saying.
Right.
What would you say would be the one for 2000?
Oh, that would take a lot of thought, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, okay, let's take it back. What would you say would be the one for the 80s? Because I'm trying to think, and I'm sure
This is like the topic for a whole different episode. I know that, really, to me, this trend goes back to the 60s with Dennis Hopper and Easy Rider.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's solid.
In the 70s, it was Scorsese, starting with Taxi Driver. So if we were going to transcribe this to the 80s, you could even
are those examples of it being good, or the examples?
Yes, those are examples of it being done well.
Because Easy Rider, I think, is great, and
you know what? I'd be tempted to call Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket
for the 80s.
Yeah.
How about Eyes Wide Shut?
Yeah, absolutely.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Kind of like the war movies.
Eyes Wide Shut was...
Eyes Wide Shut tried too hard to be both mainstream and weird at the same time.
See, I don't even call it that. I call
it good, I guess.
See, I call Eyes Wide Shut. I call that a chance for Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman to fuck on camera. I hated that movie so much.
I feel like Stanley Kubrick set out to make a much different film than what actually ended up on screen. But anyway, we went a long way for that.
Sorry about that.
I was going to say, I think I agree with the 80s and the war movies because specifically, I think Vietnam era war movies in the 80s were the focus because the people who were coming up in the 60s just
maybe Platoon.
Maybe just barely
Guns
avoiding
of
Vietnam or having had to deal with it in some capacity, and then now 20 years on, they're making movies. What's going to stand out for them to be the thing to focus on,
right,
in terms of heaviness,
which is especially ironic because Vietnam War movies are will become so important and prevalent in the next film we talk about, True Romance.
Right. And that cycle kind of repeated itself. I wouldn't say there was one that specifically stood out, but I would say that there was a plethora of in the 2000s, like the Afghan and Iraq war-centered movies.
Yeah, but I don't feel like anyone ever hit it as hard as Oliver Stone and who directed Full Metal Jacket?
Kubrick.
That was Kubrick?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't feel like anyone hit it as hard as Kubrick and Oliver Stone did with Platoon and Full Metal Jacket.
I think what people remember the most is the first half of that film.
Yeah. Because the
shit
second,
you have to go through to become a soldier.
The second half of, we're not even talking about war movies, but the second half of Full Metal Jacket is such a hard watch.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's not even, there's a lot of great actors in that movie, but the second half of it is just unwatchable, and it's borderline because the acting was not.
Do you think
good.
so?
I do.
Oh, see, I think
I believe it's two different movies.
it is. That's what I was exactly about to say. We are getting way the hell off.
I know.
While we're down this avenue.
And I'm piling on. I'm sorry about that.
This is all over Stone's fault.
because you have Stanley Kubrick seeing the boot camp, but they're still in the States, so
sure.
They still have a bit of
it's grounded.
It's grounded, but the second that it switches after the suicide of Vincent D'Onofrio's character, one of the great moments in film history. But there's literally almost a blackout wash, swipe
I
between
haven't watched
the two.
it all the way through.
But there's a split between when they're here and then when they get to Vietnam, and then it totally changes. And
I think Modine does a voiceover to do the switch.
I agree.
Now, see, we've talked a lot on this podcast, not just outside of Tarantino discussion and in the Tarantino discussion as well, about violence in cinema. To me, nothing hits me violence-wise quite as hard and sticks out to me visually as that scene near the end of Full Metal Jacket when one of the soldiers gets sniped and is laying out in the field, and the sniper opens up just a line of, like, you see squibs going off of this person getting shot just up their leg and up their body. It's so realistic, it's so graphic, it's so violent that, like, we joke about my extremely high tolerance for things like RoboCop and all these over-the-top graphic
That's
films,
cartoon.
but that's cartoonish.
Yeah, we talked about that
You can't take it
before.
seriously.
Yeah.
But the shot of this soldier who was sniped specifically as a trap for these other soldiers and then getting lit up with gunfire is so real and so hard to watch.
That's real because that's really happened.
And I think that's
so
why
disturbing.
And that's Kubrick said, okay, you saw what the fantasy could be while you're still safe at home. This is what it's real. So I think, and because he does his comment on casualties of war, because he has the rape of the village girl, so it's like he was doing all this stuff that, okay, I know what happened. This is what happened. It's not. Matthew Modine's character has basically become just a drug dealer.
Now, I'm not. When I say bad acting, I'm not necessarily talking about Matthew Modine. I'm talking really about everybody else, especially when the Stars and Stripes line up their video camera and are going by, and each person has a line, and each person says that line, and it felt like cheese, and it felt like they were rehearsing, and it felt like everybody, it was 2:00 in the morning and they'd been there for 18 hours and they just didn't, it felt like nobody gave a damn anymore. Is it just say the line? Let's just can I go about it?
But if you look at the newsreels of that time, that's what it sounded
Sure.
like.
No, I get it. And I get that that's what was probably really said, but just, it was the way it felt like they did.
I don't know why I'm being devil's advocate, because it's not my favorite Kubrick film. Yeah. I do love it, but
this reminds me of Natural Born Killers, in a way.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Let's wrap that back around.
I'm so sorry,
It's
guys.
okay.
I'm so sorry.
But with Natural Born Killers, are we trying to connect it to, since it's just a story?
Well, we should.
Story credit.
To True Romance?
To Tarantino.
Yeah, and I'll discuss that when we're segueing into True Romance. Before we get there, so this was 26 years ago, 1994, and as we've discussed, this was sort of that experimental film. I read some reviewer called it the world's most expensive student film. Like, it's so artistic and over the top. Does it, and you two just watched it recently, does it stand up as the commentary that Stone intended it to be 26 years later, at a time when the 24-hour news cycle, God, I'm struggling to speak tonight, at a time when the 24-hour news cycle was still pretty much in its infancy, and we were just starting to see violence of this caliber getting sensationalized, and so much of this is what Stone was depicting and satirizing in the film. It's 26 years removed from that, when we have seen a lot of this done since then. Does it stand up?
I think it stands up better as a representation of satire and what's happening now than it did at the time. I think at the time we probably were more affected by how sensationalized it was and how controversial it was. So we didn't, and this is pretty much written about, that we didn't accept the satire 26 years ago. What it represents with the 24-hour, and it's less than 24 hours now. It's like 24-second news cycle. That just everything, every tweet is new. So it's like,
what did you do to the timeline? Because we still live in 24-hour days.
But the news cycle.
Are you on a 24-second?
I think what he means is there's so much that they want to put out there that
if you come to it 24 hours later, you're too late.
Right.
You have to be on it 24 seconds.
Right, but when I say the 24-hour news cycle, I mean like these news stations, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of them are they are hurting for content.
Exactly.
So that they are constantly pushing something. So that's why we're seeing so many, retrospective stories that you would not have seen. You would have gotten them at your 6 a.m. news and your 6 p.m. news 30 years ago, but now it is just constantly running. And in 94, that was still a relatively new concept. Like, it started in the mid to late 80s. So we're about a decade or less into it when this film comes out.
Yeah, and it's, you didn't get to this part when you rewatched it, but it's not until the second half when we get to the prison that the actual satire of media is represented, and it's also a comment on the evils of the penal system and blah 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 blah, and so the idea of Robert Downey Jr.'s presence in the film is much more large in the second half of the film and is much more representational of what's happening now, I believe. So I think So Oliver Stone, again, was ahead of his time, and so he was vilified for the fact that it was not representative of that time for the most part, except you only had like a couple of those sensationalized news magazine shows like First Edition or whatever. But now every station, every network has something, and the cable news is nothing but news sensationalism. So it's like... I think that satire is much more, especially for the second half of the film, is much more prevalent and relatable for now.
Right now in 2020, Mickey and Mallory Knox would have their own podcast dedicated to at least 10 of them.
Or they would be on...
That's what I was going to say. It would be ridiculously easy. You would not need someone like Oliver Stone to make this movie today. And then on top of that, you would add to the fact that there's social media. There's it's been a whole nother generation of cynicism on top of what there was in the 90s. There's just more bleakness to it. Now on top of everything else, you would have not just the 24-hour news cycle, you would have the pundit shows going on and on about this, and then using this excuse to blame whatever political party they didn't like for this happening. Yeah. And on top of that, again,
Donald Trump refuses to give Mickey and Mallory Knox the death penalty, and
then on top of that, just
or vice versa,
just cynical people commenting on the internet and making memes about it.
Right.
Well, this week on My Favorite Murder, Mickey and Mallory Knox.
Yeah.
There you go.
Doggz, what are your thoughts?
I agree with that for the most part. It's again, it goes right back to it when you have if you fast forward today, the sensationalism that they portrayed in the prison scene, the way they spliced it into the Coke commercial, and the way they just sexed up everything a little bit. Nowadays we call that fake news. Or at least within the past 2 years, we started calling it fake news.
It's technically what it is. It's just standard programming where they just tossed a commercial.
Right.
And this was before 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
So
this was difference, about 7 years.
The difference in viewpoints, this is why it was so controversial, because we didn't believe stuff like this could happen. And then once 9/11 happens and that shit, and nobody at that time would have thought we would be in Quarantino at this point. So that sensationalism isn't really that sensational anymore.
Well, that's exactly to your point. That's where I was headed with that. It's the sensationalism that they had back then. They were making a satire of it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, Mickey and Mallory Knox would be a rerun of Cops.
Right.
What we watch on Saturday night.
They would be one of like maybe the 3 active shooters that were reported on that particular hour.
Exactly.
The Attitude Era of wrestling, which we can talk about on This Is a Work.
Very nice.
Because there is a moment when Mickey is talking to Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Wayne, about, you know, his ranking and the favorites of serial killers or mass murderers, and, you know, he's like, "Oh, you're better than Ted Bundy." And he says, "What about Manson?" "Not quite Manson." He said, and Woody's like, or Mickey's like, "Yeah, he is the king." And at this point, we still are ranking in 2020. We are still ranking our favorite serial killers, and Manson's still, even though he's been usurped in a lot of ways and kind of seen as a kind of an idiot, but he's still kind of considered the king of that kind of hobby.
Without hobby.
So, well, you know what I'm saying. It's like that if we're ranking the greatest killers of all time, and he never even killed anyone, but the fact that he had so much power over the people.
Just look at the Golden State Killer.
Exactly.
Active in the 70s, inactive for 30 years, brought to the limelight by Michelle McNamara's book, caught like a year or two later.
Yep.
All right, well, real quick, because we're almost at the 45-minute mark.
Sure.
Would this have worked better as if it had been a Tarantino film, if he'd gotten to direct it himself and use his own script for it? Doggz?
I have to say yes. It would have been better because, as I stated before, Oliver Stone was getting out there with his sensationalism. I've got the word in my head now. With his symbolism, mainly just the scorpion and the snake, the entire movie, and the Batman Askew that you saw.
The Dutch angles?
Yeah. From that every time you saw Mickey and Mallory, and then later on you saw with Tommy Lee Jones in the prison show, and it's got a bit much. And I feel like if Tarantino had done it, I feel like it still would have been just as bloody, just as violent, but in a more, and I hesitate to say it this way, but in a more hokey, fun way.
Coherent.
Yeah.
Because I get the feeling, just based on how, I mean, from what I've seen and what you guys have described, it's a movie that kind of nudges you, nudges you and points at the screen going, "Dad, what about that? How's that?"
Yeah.
Yep. Stan, real quick, would it have worked better as a Tarantino film?
Have you read the original?
Yeah, so listeners, you can find Tarantino's original screenplay before Oliver Stone and his 2 screenwriters heavily rewrote it. You can find his original version of the script online and read it. It's been a long time since I've read it, but it is in my opinion, it is significantly better. Because
I'm not sure, I haven't read it, so I'm not sure how much, and of course he only got a story credit, so I'm sure a lot of it, and it's linear,
sort of
time frame wise. So I think there would have been a lot of differences in the sense of, I think the violence would have been more sporadic, and then with a great grand finale of violence like in Once Upon a Time. But I don't know, because I'm not sure if that his original script, Tarantino's original script, was at his height, because obviously they thought that it wasn't so great that they couldn't rewrite it. I'm sure that Stone said, I need to make this a little bit less somber, so it's like let's make it more funny. That's why he cast Woody Harrelson for the first one, because he's funny. I'm thinking that Tarantino's script might have been a little bit more dark, probably less drug-addled. I think he would have cast a lot of the same actors, especially in the supporting roles. Tarantino probably would have played Jack Scagnetti.
I thought about that.
Ted Sizemore's character, but I don't know, just because I haven't seen and it's like I'm not sure Tarantino was at the height yet, because it would have either been a really short version or would have been a really much longer version if he was going to do everything that was represented in this movie. And again, I also saw the director's cut, which is 2 hours and 3 minutes or whatever. So I would hope that he would have the Rodney Dangerfield scene in it. I don't know if that's in the original. In
Tarantino's screenplay, the impetus for Mickey and Mallory going on their killing spree and what sets them off is Mallory's father not giving his consent. What's blessing. The wording? Thank you. Not giving his blessing for Mickey asking her to marry him. That's what sets him off, and that's what makes him kill Mallory's dad, and what gets the two of them.
So he's more innocent in Tarantino's version.
Yeah, maybe. I want to say yes. I think it would have worked better as a Tarantino film until I read the quote where he said, "The world's not ready for my serial killer movie."
It doesn't matter how enthusiastic you are. There's no guarantee he's automatically going to make a better one.
Yeah. All right, so the bridge between these two films, and to make sure that I had this right, I pulled up an article about it on a website called flavorwire.com. Natural Born Killers grew out of Tarantino's original massive script for True Romance, itself a rewrite of a script called The Open Road by Tarantino's occasional collaborator and video store coworker Roger Avery. Going off book here, just from what I know about this. So Roger Avery wrote a 50-page treatment that Tarantino then worked into this massive screenplay for both True Romance and Natural Born Killers before eventually, I think they had pitched it as a series, and that it was never going to work that way. So it got chopped into two and became Natural Born Killers and True Romance. But originally, going back to quoting the Flavor Wire article, it was originally, oddly enough, a film within a film. True Romance's character, Clarence, was writing a screenplay while traveling across the country with Alabama, and that ultra-violent road movie in his mind was what became Natural Born Killers.
Interesting.
So we're going to shift the discussion here over to True Romance and kick it off the way we did all the other ones. What does Chris know about True Romance?
Well, the answer is simple for this one: next to nothing.
Gotcha.
I know that there's a lot of good acting in this movie because I've heard it talked about endlessly. The one thing I do know is that I absolutely love the soundtrack and specifically the track. If you ever want to hear it, I think the best song from Hans Zimmer's work on that was "You're So Cool."
Yes, yes. I almost wanted
to the point where they have used it in trailers several times.
I almost wanted to include just the use of Hans Zimmer's score and specifically that track.
Some of the best use of marimba you'll ever hear.
"You're So Cool" is actually a theme.
Yeah,
a whole theme in the movie and almost a character.
It is one of my favorite.
I get to bust out some music knowledge. That's called a leitmotif.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so Chris sort of summarized Natural Born Killers pretty well, but a very brief summary of True Romance is Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette play Clarence and Alabama, a pair of young lovers who go on a road trip from Detroit to Los Angeles to sell a big suitcase full of cocaine, and hilarity and disaster ensues. So I want to start off this discussion.
God, Hollywood loves talking about cocaine, don't they?
Yeah,
they do.
So,
or we do.
Let's start it off. Clarence and Alabama. Are they cinema's dumbest protagonists, cutest protagonists, or the dumbest cute protagonists?
No, just straight dumbest. It's.
I was telling Katie.
Love makes you stupid.
Yeah, I was telling Katie. Part of what I love so much about these two characters is that they are so endearingly dumb.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I don't mean that as in they're badly written or they're badly performed. Slater and Arquette are brilliant. The characters are brilliantly written. But the characters of Clarence and Alabama, they're young, dumb kids.
Because it speaks to the movie, because this is what happens in real life. We know somebody or know somebody that knows somebody that this has happened to. They met and then they got married, and as quick as that, and then there's a huge fight somewhere, probably in Gastonia, and
before they even get to taking a road trip to sell a suitcase of
we
cocaine.
haven't even got to the cocaine. If it's in Gastonia, it's probably meth, though. But regardless, but yeah, that we all know, we all know Alabama and Clarence Worley in some fashion.
And I would argue that they're our Bonnie and Clyde, as opposed to Mickey and Mallory, because
I agree.
And Alabama's brought up in Reservoir Dogs, isn't she?
Yes, she is referenced because the original ending, spoiler alert for this movie, was that Clarence died at the end. So the reference in Reservoir Dogs would have been a call forward to her life of crime post-Clarence, where she would have eventually hooked up with Mr. White's character, and they would have done some crime together. That ticks off a future box because that's one of the few connections this movie has to the Tarantino verse as a whole.
I think it's totally connected, and we'll get to that point. But I'm sorry, guys. I don't think they're dumb, because there's just too much planning on Clarence's part, and the fact that Alabama falls into his stuff, it's like. She's an instigator. She's a reason why he's able to escape his doldrums. But he does mistakes because he could do things cleaner and better. But
I want to take.
I knew
you
it. That day was winding up the whole time. The whole time.
I like Chris's thing that love makes you do stupid shit, and that's true. But the thing is I think Clarence has been waiting to do something like this for a long time. And I think Alabama, I think the fact that she was a call girl at this moment was just a stopgap in her life of activity, criminal activity. So I think they're not like we're criminals right now. I think it's like
They're actively moving cocaine.
It's in their blood.
So I want to take you to task on that statement about Clarence's level of planning.
Look at that face.
I saw him just rearing back.
Well, it was all right. I can buy that they might not be the dumbest protagonists in cinema, but it was when you said Clarence's level of planning, which in the film is next to none. Clarence meets Alabama under a contrived circumstance one night. They have sex. He professes his love to her and her to him, and they get married the next morning. She tells him about Drexel. That night, the night of their wedding, he decides to just go over to her pimp's house.
He thinks fast.
Too fast.
He thinks fast, not smart.
He ends up murdering Drexel and accidentally leaving his driver's license at Drexel's place.
And that is brought up in the film. That he left his driver's license.
When I was younger, I was really addicted to the America's Dumbest Criminals type of books. There were so many stories like that.
I had to reason why he would. I think he did it on purpose.
Oh,
no.
Absolutely not.
I think so. Because it was his fame.
It led directly to his father's murder.
I know, which we'll talk about.
Yes,
one of the
we
great
will.
Scenes.
But then let's talk about his harebrained scheme of taking this cocaine out to
Michael
LA.
Rappaport.
Yeah, to his
who
friend
represents us.
Actor.
You were talking about how everybody knows some, and I think Michael Rappaport's character, especially being an out of work actor, totally represents us. Yeah. But and which this is the only Tarantino film that Rappaport is in, and I can't believe that. Michael Rappaport has done a bunch of Spike Lee movies, but he's only done one Tarantino film. What the fuck?
You want to talk about the struggling actor thing? When we were watching it the other night, the scene of his audition for T.J. Hooker is so painfully accurate.
Yes, it
that is. Katie was like, "Wow, that's right on the nose." And I was like,
and he got cast.
I can't tell you how many auditions I've been on where you walk in the room, you sit down, you have one line to say, you receive zero direction. You have to mime you're driving a car or you're working on, you have to mime something. You say your one line and then thank you.
We'll get back.
Now combine that with having to drive 4 hours one way to get to do that and then drive 4 hours back. That scene hurt me to watch this time.
And yes, they did a lot of their decision making might not have been up to par. But I can't believe, and I can't say they didn't know what they were doing. Because
Clarence knew the bare minimum of what he was doing.
Does he know how to operate a motor vehicle?
He does.
Okay.
And he knew enough that L.A. was probably the best place to offload.
A bunch of coke.
Yeah.
And the whole, let's go see a kung fu movie. And again, another Tarantino movie that begins in a diner / bar.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so the opening dialogue.
If I absolutely had to fuck a guy, gun to my head, it'd be Elvis. Yeah.
And then the portrayal of Elvis in that movie, an unseen Val Kilmer,
Nothing good happens in a diner is all I'm learning.
Yep, skinny Val Kilmer.
But I did love them. And I thought Patricia Arquette turns out to be the perfect.
She's so delightful.
And for her to grow up to do Boyhood.
Medium.
Well, no, she does Boyhood. She won the Oscar for Boyhood.
Medium.
She grows up to do Boyhood, and it's like, oh my God, that's awesome. But she's wonderful. I had forgotten how much True Romance was an influence on me. I had not seen that movie in 20 years, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is why we kept watching Tarantino films. For me, it wasn't Natural Born Killers. For me, it was True Romance.
I want to add one more descriptor onto that. Dumbest, cutest, or dumbest and cutest. Also, the world's dumbest, cutest, horniest protagonist.
I chalk that up.
That would be Mickey Mallory.
That
would be Mickey Mallory, though. Because like I said, nobody kisses better than Juliette Lewis on film.
Okay.
Again, strange acolytes. It's
weird superlatives. All right. So as Stan brought up, we talked about the connections already to Alabama getting mentioned in Reservoir Dogs. Let's talk about the scene. Hopper versus Walken.
Oh,
if you have never seen this scene, you can, even out of the context of the film, just go and watch it by itself. It's brilliant. I believe this scene, along with De Niro and Pacino in Heat, these two scenes should be taught in film acting classes. They should be taught in screenwriting classes. Putting two characters across from each other and just having them talk. It is every bit as engaging and as powerful as the best war movie shootout or Transformers blown up action scene. It's perfection.
Well,
I can't oversell it enough.
The funny thing about that, I was doing some research, and as it turns out, Hopper and Walken during that scene said every single word that was in that script. The only time that they moved off of did a little improv was when they said, "You're part cantaloupe," or "You're part eggplant, you're a cantaloupe."
Yes.
That's the only bit of improv in that entire scene. And that's just a testament to how fine of actors that they are, and to say every single word of the dialogue and make it sound just like we're having a conversation right now.
It's the most terrifying I have seen Christopher Walken, because I think when most people think of Christopher Walken, they think of silly, weird stutter in his voice. His weird line pacing and his weird deliveries. There is none of that here. Mm-hmm. He, as Don Vincenzo, is legitimately scary in that scene, and he's scary by virtue of just sitting there and talking.
He's scary, but he's literally digging and having fun with the joke, with the discussion, and it pains him to have to kill.
I haven't killed somebody since 1984.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it literally, it's not he doesn't want to, because he actually likes this guy by the end of this moment by the end of this scene, and he has to kill him because he has to.
So I want to preface before we continue any further with this discussion. If you've seen this scene, if you know, you know. But if you haven't, this scene the crux of this scene contains a discussion about a racial slur, which none of us are obviously going to say on this podcast. But if you watch the movie or if you watch the scene, just be aware that it is about the use of a racial slur that Hopper's character uses.
Well, that Tarantino's famous for.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of talk on this podcast about Tarantino's
He has an
casual
unending
racism.
fascination with that word.
And remember, Samuel L. Jackson is in this movie too.
Yeah, he is.
For a moment.
And I will say that given the context of the scene, I feel like outside of African American actors and characters using the N-word in his films, this is the only other use of it that I think works in his films. Mm-hmm. So to set the scene for those who haven't seen it, or maybe it's been a while, Christopher Walken's character, Don Vincenzo, is a mob boss who owns the cocaine that has been stolen, or he works for the guy who owns the cocaine. He's a mob underboss. And because Clarence
True Blue Lou.
Blue Boyle. So because Clarence was dumb enough to leave his driver's license at Alabama's pimp's home, Drexel. Played. We didn't even point out Drexel is played by Gary fucking Oldman.
Goddamn right.
They track Clarence to his father's house. Dennis Hopper plays his father, who Clarence in Alabama went and visited before leaving to go to L.A. And Don Vincenzo and a couple of his guys show up to torture Clarence's father into giving up where his son is. And Hopper's range in this scene is phenomenal because he goes from being confused and scared. You sort of watch him go through the 5 stages of grief over the course of this 10 to 12 minute scene because he's terrified he's confused and he's terrified when they get in there. He tries bargaining with Don Vincenzo. I just put that
together. That's brilliant.
And I think that started when we first see him with Alabama and Clarence when they first get to his place, and he's already starting with the bargaining. He's already starting with the acceptance and, a resistance to, he knows shit's going to go down the second he sees his son again. So Dennis Hopper is great in that.
The monologue, his delivery, the shift that you see just in his facial features when he decides that this is what he's going to do. From the second that he asks Don Vincenzo for a cigarette.
Yep. Because he knows the address is on the refrigerator.
I don't think he does. I think he's forgotten about it.
I don't think he would have done all of that if he had known. He wouldn't have gone through all of that and let himself purposefully be killed if he had remembered that Clarence's address was on the fridge.
Because I'll be honest, would you honestly bother a newly wedded couple on their honeymoon? Of course you wouldn't. It's he stuck it on the fridge for an emergency. He forgot about it.
No, because I think he knew that he had put what's his face's address on the refrigerator, but he never tells. He makes homie work for that shit and never tells him. And I think it's strictly because he made peace with his boy. Mm-hmm. Which he hadn't done in forever, and he finally made peace, and he was not going to rat his son out. And so it's like if homie finds it out, it's not going to be by him. But I think he does know because can't have that address there just for henchmen to find it. No, I think Pops knows that's there, but he's not going to rat him out, and that's what makes that speech and that picking that particular joke or particular story to tell Christopher Walken's character, that makes it that much more poignant because all he had to do was say if he wanted to live through that, and he's a disgraced cop. He was an alcoholic. He was a disgrace. So it's like this is his last hurrah. Yeah. I'm going to save somebody. He's not going to point that out, and he could have easily pointed that out if he wanted to live and wanted to get through this. And because that's why he takes that all that time. It's like, okay, am I going to tell him that the address is on the refrigerator or am I not? No, I'm going to tell him the story.
Yeah.
Let's
just the way that Hopper deflates as soon as that is done, like you watch all the bravado leave him. He just kind of slinks down in his chair and is just waiting to be killed.
Yeah.
It is one of cinema's best performances, in my opinion.
my God.
It's just one of the best scenes of all time. Just for our listeners out there, if you haven't seen it, I just want you to be aware of the content of the scene. But
the content of it is, it's almost immaterial because it's really just there to antagonize.
Yeah.
It's because he knows he's not getting out of this.
Yeah.
But he's going to throw the last punch.
My man's going down swinging, and so he takes that. Walken previously offers him a Chesterfield when he first comes in. He
Thank
says,
you.
No.
I couldn't remember the brand of cigarettes.
And then after he realized, I'm gonna die. Mm-hmm. Let me get one of those Chesterfields.
And what would have been so great is if it would have been a red apple.
Oh, it should have been, right?
But because it wasn't a Tarantino.
Yeah, it's like it's not Tarantino's.
But the idea that, I guess that's the question. Are these in the Tarantino verse?
Well, if you count the Alabama, despite the fact that the ending is not, and it's possible that even before she became one of Drexel's girls, Alabama could have known Mr. White.
Right.
Like the connection is obvious. Like I said in the Reservoir Dogs episode, you don't encounter a lot of people or characters named Alabama.
Exactly.
Well, she also said this is her. She has been on 4 dates.
Yeah.
Who knows where they have come? That one of those dates could have been Mr. White.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah, and I think this is those two actors. Tony Scott won the lottery because those two actors are two of the best actors to just do the one-on-one close-up scenes. Because you got Walken in Deer Hunter, you got Walken in Pulp Fiction, you got in almost every early Walken picture doing the one-on-one across a table or across a chair. Very short space between and doing these great monologues before he offs somebody or offs himself, right? Hopper's the same way. Early Hopper stuff, Easy Rider with Peter Fonda, they may have been on motorcycles, but those close-ups and those one-on-one conversations, and then he goes on to do Hoosiers and stuff like that, which is all about him being individual with another actor. And then so put those two guys together who are probably the most naturalistic actors about making things real and natural in a scene. And I totally agree. It's like the fact that Walken doesn't do the cue card readings and stuff, I think because he's listening to Dennis Hopper, and and Hopper's listening to Walken, and they're enjoying each other's company.
And there's so much that can be said about two actors looking in each other's eyes when they're engaging, whether it's on film or on stage. Just the connection that two people make.
Yeah.
When Walken cracks up at the end of the story.
Oh yeah, like to add on to what Doggz was saying about that. From what I was reading, Walken did not realize that calling somebody an eggplant or part eggplant was a very weird racial slur.
Oh yeah, because it's the term aubergine.
Yeah,
it's like a UK slur.
Yeah, Walken
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, Walken didn't realize that was a semi-racial slur. So "you're a cantaloupe" was just a non sequitur on his part, and it's one of the funniest goddamn lines.
And
go ahead.
It's like Tarantino stuff has so many the scenes. There's so many the scenes in Tarantino's stuff. And I guess that's one thing the Natural Born Killers doesn't have. I don't think, unless we count the Rodney Dangerfield moment, that might have been the scene in that. But I can't say this is my... No, after seeing it again, this is one of the top 2 or 3 Tarantino the scenes he's written. And like Two Dogs said, this is script for script. And So Tarantino was watching this and saying, I wrote those words. and he's got the whole story about how he heard it at a party, and and it's like he was telling it at a party, and it's like, I need to put this in a script. And that he gets Walken and Hopper to tell the story that he had heard. And
where he got that from a friend of the family that they called Big D, who actually told him about the Moors conquering Sicily. Right. He told him that when he was a little boy. He remembered that. He kept it, and when he wrote Trumance. Trumance. I can't talk either.
That's okay. That's a perfect amalgamation.
Samuel L. Jackson's character is named Big D.
Oh my God.
How about that, huh?
That is fantastic.
And to speak on something else, this is you were talking about Natural Born Killers being a fever dream. Personally, I think this is Clarence Worley's fever dream. The whole movie. If you think about it, he works. He doesn't get out much. He doesn't have any friends. He reads comic books every day.
Watches kung fu films.
What better? What would you think about? What would be your fantasy day? Oh, I don't know. Maybe a hooker meeting me while I'm watching my kung fu movies. We go back.
She falls in love with me.
She falls in love with me.
I'm so good at sex. She falls in love with me.
And then, because Clarence wants to be the hero, just like his comic book characters,
and Elvis
goes over that night to kill the pimp that she was originally with.
Slay the dragon.
They fight, and when he gets her, thinks he accidentally gets a ton of cocaine and is going to sell it and make himself rich so that him and his beloved can live happily ever after
in Mexico for $200,000.
Yeah, in Catalina. But as they do, the feds find out. Not only do the feds find out, the mafia finds out their coke is missing. And
James Gandolfini. Let's not.
Yeah, that's right. James Gandolfini is one of Don Vincenzo's mobsters.
Everybody is in this movie. It's
Brad Pitt. We haven't talked about him yet.
Stephen Wright.
Stephen Wright is in this. Yes, he is.
So what you're saying is the whole movie is a Jacob's Ladder scenario?
In a sense, yeah, kinda.
That was a how did this get made shout out right there.
I'm a liar. Stephen Wright's actually in Natural Born Killers.
And according to the way that it was originally written, it very well could have been.
Yeah.
I think Clarence is I think Clarence wants to be he wants to be a superhero, and this is his version of a superhero. Mm-hmm. He can't be Elvis, he can't be Spider-Man, he can't be Superman, but he can be this badass,
the dumbest man.
Yeah, and you notice
he there's the dumbest drug mule that ever lived.
Well, you also notice in this movie too, when he's talking to people other than Alabama, he is your quintessential nerd. He is talking about Elvis. He is talking about Spider-Man. He's like, hey, Elvis, I saw this episode. There's this other article that you can read, and da-ba-da-ba-da-da-da. But he's with Alabama, well, now he's a hero. Mm-hmm. And everything he does is, to quote Alabama, just so cool.
Just so cool, man.
I love that.
Even when they go to the director's condo, and the bouncer says he pulls out. He said, "No, I got a gun right here. It's mine." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take that from you." The coolest line in the movie is, "Well, you're gonna have to." I mean, does it get much more badass than that?
Well,
was Pump Up the Volume before or after this?
Before.
It was before. I thought. Yeah.
Well, lending some credence to your theory that I've never thought about before, I the next thing that I was going to bring up was a fun little trivia fact. You could be onto something because the eye that Clarence loses at the end is the same eye that Drexel is missing.
Wow.
When we meet Gary Oldman as Drexel,
Yes.
his left eye is heavily scarred and he's blind in it. And by the end of the film, Clarence is blind in his left eye and wearing an eye patch.
And of course he's wearing an eye patch because who doesn't wear an eye patch that's not a holy badass?
And to go along with the fever dream, that just being his fantasy, and I hope, and I'm sure he never wants to wake up from it because it's one of those dreams that you don't want to wake up from. But the idea that he asks permission and gets permission from Elvis. Elvis is his guardian angel. Elvis says, I've always liked you and I always will. It's like you're doing the right decision. And this is why I'm saying he's not totally doing stuff willy-nilly. He actually has had thought about it and has had Elvis say, yes, this is the thing to do. So it's like if
which is a completely sane and rational line of
if
thought.
Elvis has told you,
I want Elvis to be my voice of reason.
Yeah.
if Elvis is saying you're doing good, then yeah, go for
Then
it.
you gotta be, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. Now, this is a continuity thing. It may be a continuity thing, or it may have something to do with what I was talking about. I don't know if you guys caught this or not, but he's driving a purple Cadillac. You would go on the assumption is like he loves Elvis. Elvis has a pink Cadillac. As like he can't get a pink Cadillac, but he did get a purple one, and that's pretty damn close. If you notice, when him and Alabama leave the hotel, they get into a pink Cadillac.
I did not notice that.
That Cadillac changed from purple to pink. Now I don't know if that was a contrast thing.
It might have been.
Or a continuity issue or something like that. But I thought that was worth mentioning.
Very nice.
Emulating Elvis, the man who secretly met with President Nixon to get a federal drug enforcement badge so he could sneak his drugs around easier.
Exactly.
All right, so we've already talked about how brilliant Dennis Hopper's monologue is in that scene with Walken, but just aside from that, this film has some brilliant monologues in it. James Gandolfini's monologue to Alabama about how killing somebody the first time is really difficult, ending with, now I do it just to see their expressions change.
Yeah.
And Doggz, I've heard you do this monologue a million times, and I've loved it every time. Drexel's monologue to Clarence when he shows up at the club.
I love it. It is my favorite. Do you want me to do it?
If you can do it, yeah, go ahead.
Do it.
Oh, put me on the spot. I may mess this up. I'll try it.
This is David Two Donks Hayes as Gary Oldman as Drexel Spivey.
Cover your left eye for realism.
So he goes into the club. He's or it's really just a house though.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just a house party.
And he says, "See, sit down, boy. We got everything from Middle-Eyed Joe to Dan DeFino. Grab yourself something to eat." "No thanks." "No thanks." "You know what I think? I think you're too scared to eat. Now see, you know you done given up your shit, right? You sat down and started munching on an egg roll. I'm thinking, oh, this motherfucker is crazy." I wonder how'd it go. I've already messed it up. See, who is this crazy motherfucker? Sitting down here munching on my food like he ain't got a care in the world, and who knows? Maybe he don't, because he's such a bad motherfucker. On the television right there's a couple of breasts hanging out. You ain't even bothered to look. You just been clocking me. Now, I know I'm pretty, but I ain't as pretty as a couple of titties." He throws the lamp back at him and he catches it and he, "Ooh, look, this child's fierce." And Clarence goes, "I ain't eating because I ain't hungry. I ain't sitting because I ain't staying. And I ain't looking at the TV because I've already seen it. It's called the Mac." And he goes to the cast. I don't remember the cast.
Yeah, including Richard Pryor. That's the only one I remember.
Yeah, Richard Pryor. And I don't. God, see, now you put me on the spot. Now
That's
I can't
all good.
remember.
That's what I wanted to hear. That I love Gary Oldman's delivery of that monologue, and I love yours as well.
And Gary Oldman is so damn. This was my introduction to Gary Oldman.
Mm-hmm.
I realized he was in Dracula.
Right. Well, fun bit of trivia there. Gary Oldman had received the script to review, but had not yet read it when he met with Tony Scott, and so he just asked Tony Scott to tell him what the character was like. And after Scott pitched him on the character of Drexel Spivey, Oldman just agreed to it right then and there.
Yeah,
without even reading the script.
This is my number 3 movie. I love this movie. I love this movie since the first time I saw it. I went and saw it in the theater, and absolutely, well, I've always liked Christian Slater. There was a period of my life when I I may or may not have emulated Christian Slater a little bit.
We all did.
Yeah, he was cool, man. He had the Jack Nicholson / Dennis Hopper voice that I used to go around even trying to talk like Christian Slater. I would go around and I would do the thing from Heathers.
That's why I asked about Pump Up the Volume, because
he would go greetings and salutations, and
because he was one of the coolest of the cool. Those 5-10 years,
Yeah, he was at the height of his powers at this making of this movie. Dennis Hopper has always been the coolest ever. Walken was coming out swinging. He's been around forever, but people were starting to notice Walken now. Like, the youth was starting to notice him, and they were like, "Who is this guy that's talking?" Like, that
does one moment in Tarantino films.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he gets paid, but those 10 minutes that he does in Tarantino movies, and because you don't see him again after that scene with Dennis Hopper, right?
Right. No, he was done after
True
that.
Blue. Blue Boyle is with them when they come to Hollywood. So it's like the 10 minutes that he gets to spend in a Tarantino film, and
he spends it with Dennis motherfucking Hopper.
Or the kid in Pulp Fiction. It's like, what greatness, it's like.
All-star cast. Just the movie.
Brad Pitt is Floyd, the stoner roommate.
Right.
I want to give a special mention to Chris Penn Tom
I forgot
Sizemore
about Chris Penn being in this
as the 2 police officers. Now, from what I understand, Tom Sizemore's character was supposed to have been the same in both. Scagnetti. Because Scagnetti, that's another mention that I forgot to make. In Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Blonde mentions Scagnetti being his parole officer. In Natural Born Killers, Tom Sizemore plays a character named Scagnetti. And so that character was supposed to have been the same in all 3 of those things.
I love those connections.
And going back very briefly to Tom Sizemore's character in Natural Born Killers, that was apparently, from what I read, written to be like a more hard-boiled detective than the psychopath that he is in.
Because he becomes Harvey Keitel in the Nicolas Cage Harvey Keitel.
I could have said it if you hadn't brought it up. Shit.
Where he's the crazy cop.
Yeah.
Cocaine-addled cop. That's what Tom Sizemore is in Natural Born Killers, and I agree that it's probably more
Bad Lieutenant Port of Call.
Yes,
there it is.
Bad Lieutenant.
He's more Bad Lieutenant in Natural Born Killers, where he probably should have been more Robert Forster and Jackie Brown.
And then we would see Harvey Keitel and Nicolas Cage again in National Treasure.
Yeah. But yeah, I said all that to say that Tom Sizemore and Chris Penn are great in those roles as the world's most enthusiastic, job-loving police officers.
Chris Penn.
Bronson Pinchot.
Pinchot is great. The elevator scene. Again, another the scene.
Yeah. Oh my God. Much better. At the time, he was doing Perfect Strangers. Jesus Christ. How did I don't know about you, but I hated that show passionately. The only thing I liked about it was the opening song, because they did that back then. They wrote songs specifically to open up a sitcom.
Yeah. Well, so two more things I want to bring up before we wrap up this discussion. One of them, there's not a whole lot of discussion about it. I just want to talk about it real quick, and that is the perfect storm that is the climax of this film.
Jesus Christ.
Because, to sum up, Clarence, Alabama, and their friend Dick, played by Michael Rappaport, plus Elliot. Dick Ritchie, yeah, and Elliot, their LA connection to sell this coke, go to the hotel room of a famous film director. I keep forgetting producer and director, because I keep forgetting. God, what was his name? The guy that they're going to see?
Lee. Lee, played by Saul Romanek.
Yeah.
Who's in
Lee Donowitz. Who is the grandfather of Eli Roth's character in Inglourious Bastards. I'm sorry, he is the grandson of Eli Roth's character in Inglourious Bastards.
Wow.
Donnie Donowitz
awesome.
in Inglourious Bastards.
No fucking way.
Yes, that is another Tarantino connection that I forgot
that definitely
about.
is verse.
So awesome.
So True Romance is definitely Tarantino verse in that.
Yes, it is. So they go to Lee Donowitz's hotel room to sell him this cocaine, and Donowitz has two well-armed bodyguards. As the deal goes down, Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore's characters, the police officers, along with the whole team of officers, bust into the hotel room to take them down. Immediately thereafter, 4 Sicilian mobsters bust in on the other side of the room, leading to an incredibly tense Mexican standoff. I'm aware that that's an insensitive statement now, but I can't think of what else to call it.
I always thought it was called that just because it took place in Mexico. I mean, essentially, didn't it? Like the originator?
I have no idea. I don't know what else to call it.
I don't either. That's the problem.
A stalemate?
Sure.
Sure.
It kind of is. But a stalemate is usually between two sides, not three.
And it's usually a very boring thing that happens.
Well, as this is happening, Clarence is in the bathroom talking to his vision of Elvis, while poor Alabama is stuck literally in this circle. Cops on one side, insane bodyguards on another, Sicilian mobsters on the other. This leads to an insane shootout, all because Lee loses his temper at Elliot essentially backstabbing him.
He found out that Elliot rolled over on him.
Yeah.
Was wired.
Yeah, he was wearing a wire to the drug deal. So he throws a pot of hot coffee into Elliot's face and sets off a shootout that is just absurd.
And I was so scared because I thought this was going to be a Tarantino, and that because I really wanted people to survive, and I really wanted Dick Ritchie to survive, and I was
gets away scot-free.
Yeah, I know he was going to die. I was like, oh, they're going to kill Dick, and it's like he found a way to crawl out the door, and he just ran off down the hall.
His best friend,
thus making him the smartest man in the room.
I cheered because this makes it not Tarantino's, because the character you want to live gets to live.
Because he had to be on TJ Hooker the next week.
That's right.
That's why it's like he's not going to make the show, and he made it. So it's like, because I had forgotten that he survives, so it's like, so when he does get himself out of there, that scene,
it's a perfect storm. Of a climax.
Yeah.
But that's what leads to Clarence getting, I'm assuming that his eye gets grazed with a bullet and blinds him. Yeah. It is initially presented as though he got shot in the eye. But once you see him closer up, you see that it grazed his eyebrow.
Because originally it wasn't Tarantino's script. He died. He is dead.
Yeah, he died. And it was apparently, I have not read Tarantino's script for True Romance. This is coming from what I read on TV Tropes, but apparently the original ending was much more depressing, with Alabama driving off into the sunset, and instead of the cheerful, uplifting final monologue we get in the movie, originally it was her saying that she never actually loved or cared about Clarence. She used him as a vehicle to sell the cocaine and get the money as she drives off into the sunset in Mexico.
Wow.
do not like that, especially compared to the happily ever after ending we get.
Well, I mean,
and it turns out Tarantino likes this ending.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, because that sounds like it sounds like a twist for the sake of a twist, and on top of that, way to shit on the entirety of your movie up to that point.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
So yeah, I want to talk about the ending for a second, but I also want to wrap out this discussion by eulogizing and memorializing one of the most important characters in the film, a character that is essential to the plot of this film. None of this would have been possible without this character, and that is the suitcase full of cocaine.
Yeah.
That is so lovingly shot. Well, I say shot, I mean filmed. It ultimately...
It's shot, too.
It ultimately meets its untimely demise at the end. When somebody in that hotel room, I've never caught who it is. I'd have to like freeze frame it to see. Somebody in the hotel room picks it up and yeets it into the air.
Yeah.
And somebody shoots
Who
it.
did that?
I think it was Dick. That's how he was able to get...
Is that how he got out of it?
Was it Dick?
Because he throws it up and
I've watched this movie dozens
and
of
he
times, and
sneaks
I've
out
never noticed who.
when the powder is...
You know what? I think you're right, Stan. I think it was.
You see the suitcase get thrown into the air, and some eagle eye. I know it's one of the police
well,
officers.
everyone's on a hair trigger, so he knew just like tossing it, they would direct their attention to the thing moving and just start shooting.
Yep, it gets hit with the shotgun shell and explodes cocaine all over the place.
It's either Dick or it's Elliot.
Yeah.
No,
Well, Elliot
had-
gets lit up with automatic gunfire.
Yeah, Elliot got shot seconds before it got thrown up.
Yeah, poor Elliot gets a pot of hot coffee thrown in his face. He stands up as the shooting is starting and is caught in the middle, and dude just gets lit up.
What about Tom Sizemore's detective killing the henchman or the bodyguard that hates cops? You know, he comes back and dude is still alive.
Oh, I didn't even notice that because Sizemore's character goes down pretty fast.
It was Chris Penn.
Chris Penn.
Yeah.
This is for
Cody.
This is for
Yeah.
Cody.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Because right as they're about to siege the hotel room, it cuts to the security cam footage of them outside, and Sizemore's character goes, "Oh shit, I forgot my vest." And then literal seconds into the shootout, he also gets lit up and dies. But as we see with the other, the African-American cop that's with them, this poor guy, it looks like he just showed up to do them a favor. He's wearing jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
He does put on a vest and ends up getting shot in the waist right below the damn vest and bleeds out on the couch.
In which that guy, I was watching this with Kara the other night, and Kara pointed out that he's been in so many things, and I can't recognize him from anyone. The only place that I thought he might be from was he was the other FBI agent in Die Hard, but that's a guess.
I've always felt bad, and I had never paid attention to what he was doing. But when they're miking up Elliot to go to the drug exchange, the guy is just this police officer is just eating his lunch and hanging out.
Yeah.
It literally feels like they were like, "We need somebody else to go on this raid with us," and he's like, "I'll do it." And then poor guy gets shot in the stomach and bleeds out. I do love the "this is for Cody" moment. But yeah. Rest in peace, suitcase of cocaine.
well, some of it must have survived.
Is it
because
Wurlitzer? The
What's that?
black cop who dies? Is it
Yes.
Wurlitzer? Okay.
Yeah.
Michael Beach.
Some of it must have survived because
The cocaine?
yeah, because that's what they would have used to get down to Mexico, right?
No, they took the suitcase full of money. Alabama grabs it
That's right. That they had the money already.
and then crawls away to
Yeah.
clearance.
yeah.
Good God, this guy is working as in I'm scrolling past the ton of stuff he did this year alone.
Really?
He's done a lot of stuff.
Oh,
He's been constantly working. Good for him, man.
yeah, for real.
I mean,
Well, Kara called it. Good on you, boo.
yeah, very recent stuff. He was Black Manta's father in Aquaman.
Really?
Jesse, yeah, Manta's father.
Wow.
Well, see, that movie
Stop that,
was
Stan.
that movie was terrible. So how am I supposed to remember that?
No, that was one. I mean, by all accounts, that was one of the better DC movies.
yeah.
So, I mean, on a scale on that.
And
scale,
that character is good too.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
seen
oh man,
Aquaman.
yeah. This guy, he's great. He's like a career character actor. 'Cause he pops up in various shows and
Well,
yeah. You no doubt we've seen him and stuff. We just can't recall.
Again, working in Tarantino related stuff, you're gonna have a career.
well, I'm trying to think if I missed any topics of discussion, and I don't think I did. I think we covered the film pretty well.
The whole thing.
The only thing we haven't is the use of music, where
Hans Zimmer's score. Yeah, we called that out briefly.
and the fact that it's 9 Inch Nails got famous for Natural Born Killers,
Yeah.
but how connected it is to the usual Tarantino verse of music, and have to say that True Romance is a little bit closer, but it's still that where Tarantino actually, it's part of the movie, it's in the movie, it's a character in the movie. These are still soundtracks, and it's still distanced from the people in the movies.
Well, it's the underlying steel drum that's in that's
And the
going
marimba.
through. There you go.
No, I think there's a little bit of steel drum too, but the marimba
But,
especially.
It's mainly a Hawaiian.
It's such a soft touch.
Yeah, it's a Hawaiian thing, which you can take back to Elvis because that was one of his famous.
It's
Wow.
almost like that song is a spoiler. It's the song for when they make it.
Yeah,
It's their love theme.
Where True Romance, I think the best connection to Tarantino's use of music is "You're So Cool."
Yeah.
That it becomes a major player
Well,
and refrain in the movie.
And I feel like we haven't given enough love to Tony Scott for directing this film.
no, not at all. It's
May
such a
he
great
rest in
job.
peace. Yeah, unfortunately.
And doing it on his terms.
Yeah.
Where he knew he was, and he consulted or allowed Tarantino to consult. I mean, Tarantino's did the screenplay, and it's like, I'm going to do these changes. And then Tarantino that's not bad. Good for you. I mean, it's Ridley Scott's brother. Are you going to say, fuck you, Ridley Scott's brother?
Ridley?
Ridley.
Are you literally going to Ridley?
You said it like
Really,
readily. Like the word readily. You said it like that.
Ridley Scott.
Well, the last thing that I want to bring up just real quick is out of everything in this movie, all the great scenes, everything that I love about it, my favorite shot is near the beginning when Alabama and Clarence are in the comic book shop and he is describing to her the plot of this comic book. There is a slow push in on Alabama's face, and you can watch so clearly on Patricia Arquette. That is the moment where she falls in love with Clarence. I love that shot so much, and I love that just completely non-verbal performance.
Has
in that
no
scene.
clue what he's talking about, but because he's so in love with what he's talking about, that totally enthralls her.
Well,
and brings her into it.
It's more than that. It's, you see, when he cuts the lights on, he's standing on the second level and turns around and he looks down because it goes back to what I was talking about. This is his kingdom.
This is his kingdom.
This is these are his stories in all of these books, and it's just one more reason why I think this is his fantasy.
The idea that he still has keys and he doesn't work there anymore. That's like, I used to work here. I still have keys. The manager lets me come in when I want to come in. And
I thought he still worked. I thought he did work there.
He hadn't worked there.
I thought he said he worked there a few days a week.
Yeah, a few days a week, and he and the manager likes him, and so the manager got him a hooker. It's,
because
I
it's
know
his
the
manager that hooked him up
got
with
him a hooker,
Alabama.
but I thought there was like he got. Well, it doesn't matter. He has keys, and he doesn't have to have keys. It's just that he loves that place so much. It's so meaningful in his life, and then of course he's meaningful to the manager because the manager is his buddy because the manager got him a hooker for his birthday.
A call girl.
A call girl. Sorry, it's a call girl.
When they're dead, they're hookers.
So she
Thanks,
never
Archer.
becomes a hooker.
I made that same joke the other night, and I still got called out on it by Katie.
Thank you, Archer.
Sex worker.
Sex worker.
Wow, this has been a great discussion. Thank you, guys, and thank you, Doggz, for being here and being part of it with us. As soon as I set this schedule and knew we'd be talking about True Romance, I knew that I'd want you to be here with us.
Like I said, I love this movie so much, and it's not, all the movies that are good or not good, you'll see them every day on every cable television channel or every app or whatever. This one, you don't see it at all. Like it doesn't come on HBO. You don't see it on FX or AMC, any of the movie channels. This one, you have to literally hunt it out. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think it's a damn shame. Everybody needs to enjoy this movie because it holds up.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Oh, it's on IMDb TV.
It is IMDb, but I ended up renting it so I wouldn't have to deal with
the ads.
We're on a streaming platform called Eros now.
Weird.
Yeah.
I just did it on
Prime. Chris and Stan, thank you for being part of this with me again. Really enjoyed this discussion. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and we have got a lot of content coming out over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have another episode that I'm hoping can be a massive crossover episode along Long Talks, and then after that, there is an upcoming NXT pay-per-view that will be done by the host of This Is a Takeover, one of our sister shows, hosted by...
Well, that's good, because that's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, hosted by Shelby Ray and Gina Belmont.
They're going to be in your house.
And then after that, the WWE has got Backlash coming up on June 14th.
A name that makes no sense when it doesn't follow WrestleMania.
So you can be on the lookout for those. And then in June, we will be continuing our Quarantino discussion with From Dusk Till Dawn and
You forgot
Four Rooms.
You forgot one.
What?
Next Saturday.
Oh, that's right.
Be AEW Double or Nothing.
Yep. So we've got Double or Nothing, then an episode of Long Walk Talks, then an episode of This Is a Takeover, and then another pay-per-view episode of This Is a Work. So we're going to be doing a lot of
lucky people.
Doggz, if people want to follow you online, where can they do that?
Well, I would appreciate it if you followed me on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook if you want to. Things are a little crazy right now, so
I don't recommend it.
I'm on Facebook, but sparingly, at least until all of this calms down a little bit. But Instagram's still a lot of fun, and I'm on there pretty regularly. You can hit me up, and that is 2 Doggz. This is a work. The underscores between all the words. It's number 2 DOGGZ. _ this _ is _ work.
Excellent. And what about TikTok? If our listeners want to
you
follow
can
you
find me
on
I do updates on TikTok. I'm up to 18 followers now. I'm TikTok famous. So yeah, you can find me on TikTok. I don't know if you want to comment on anything. I usually don't do anything but talk about This Is a Work or wrestling. Something I was going to do last night. I was going to talk about Becky Lynch being preggers and having to give up the belt.
You mean Preggy Lynch?
Preggy
Lynch.
Can you get pregante?
All right, and Stan, you are not on social media for the most part, are you?
I have an avatar now on Facebook.
I saw that. You want to follow him on Facebook? He's Stan Lee. Good luck finding that, fuckers. Chris, if people want to follow you online, where can they do that?
They clearly don't want to because no one's contacted me.
In the entire time we've been doing this, I think I've gotten like 3 or 4 emails from listeners. So don't feel bad.
It's just I would prefer you yell at me on Twitter, which is the preferred platform for people being angry online. You can catch me at Chris the OK.
Excellent.
So is that why we should Chris the OK Barnes?
Well, there's no Barnes. It's just Chris.
Is that your nickname?
No, there's no need for nicknames. In fact, with both of you here, I can stress that further. There's no need.
All right. Well, if you want to follow me,
Chris
on social
talking with his
media,
hands while he's mad. Barnes.
You can follow me.
You're one to talk.
You can follow me on Instagram. It's probably the best place. I'm at DB Hensley. And listeners, also be on the lookout. You might notice a change to the name of our feed and also our Facebook fan page, since we're now up to 3 podcasts that we're doing on this channel. Right now, as it stands, it's Long Walk Talks and This Is a Work. I'm coming up with ideas for just a name for our channel that is encompassing Long Walk Talks, This Is a Work, and This Is a Takeover. So be on the lookout for that. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but you might notice a change in the way that your subscription looks.
I don't know if you've explained this to our listeners or anything like that, but I just found out why it's called Long Walk Productions.
Oh, yeah. It's named after Stephen King as Richard Bachman's book, The Long Walk, which is one of my favorite books and was very influential on me as a teenager when I first started really wanting to become an artist and a filmmaker and create original content. That book had a lot to do with that.
And I can see why, because I just finished that book. I'm always late to the party for stuff like that. But, yeah, and I loved that book. I loved it. It was great.
All right, well, listeners, if you enjoyed this show or any of our sister shows, This Is a Work and This Is a Takeover, please make sure to leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you want to see more of Long Walk Productions' original content and hear some of our older episodes, you can do those by following the YouTube links in our show notes. So be on the lookout in a couple of weeks for many more new episodes. In the meantime, I hope that everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and your families are staying safe and healthy as well. Thank you very much.
Peace out.
Make good decisions already.